Hello everyone, here in our studio and also online. Welcome to the last loops of this year. I am Fernanda and this is Paul. And we were both studying here in the master's program, Designing Computation, and we will moderate today's edition. For those who are here for the first time, Loops is our event series here at New Practice, initiated together with the Berlin University Alliance and now supported by the Projekt Zukunft of the State Berlin. Today we welcome Marek Tuszynski and Sarah Grant, who will join us for a conversation. We will start with a short introduction round for each of the guests before going to the discussion, which will be open for everyone for questions in the final round. The loop that we have here in front of us will show the progress of the talk and when the time is completed. Afterwards, we invite you all to continue the conversation at the bar there. And now we will welcome our first speaker.
Yes, I have the honor to introduce our first speaker, Marek Tuszynski. He is Executive Director and co-founder of Tactical Tech. He leads efforts to explore the intersection of technology, politics, and activism. With over 30 years of experience in media, he has co-curated projects like The Glassroom, authored Visualizing Information of Advocacy, and was recognized by Mozilla's Rise 25 Award in 2023. Marek continues to challenge perceptions of technology, art, advocacy, and teaching worldwide. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Hi everyone. I don't know what you think about the bios and being, reading them aloud. It's kind of weird, no? It's like when you write them, it's like cool. When you read them quietly, it's cool. When you hear them, it's like, ouch. It's really not what you want to hear. Anyhow, so I'm here and the loop is going, and I assume it's just for me, not for both of us. And so I will take the round around this loop and guide you through something. I don't know what you're expecting. I don't know what I'm expecting. But this is not about telling you the work I do or projects, etc. It's kind of a context that I want to talk about that I call information sickness. And let's see if that works. So I work a lot with the principles of open source, Creative Commons, etc. But the other principles are around evidence, verification, data investigation, rational thinking, logic, scientific method, and so on, etc. Where we all believe that if we all stick to these principles, we would be living in a better world. But then I kind of question it. Is this enough? Is this what actually is possible? And if the technology of the current day is helping us in any way with that? Maybe the problem is somewhere else. And then I went to a party by accident because I was giving a talk and there was a bar like here, and then I was standing with this dude and he's just pulling his phone out and showing me things, and the pictures are from the party. And I'm like, wow, this is an amazing party and so on. So I'm going to show you some pictures from this party of this mostly man in this kind of outfits. And so he goes through this. It's like fascinating story. And I'm like, oh, church, what's going on there with these sport people, etc. I have no idea what's going on there. And this and so on. And then he's like, yeah, but I found also these other pictures, people posting things in mailing boxes and stuff like this, and so on. And then it even gets better, and it's funny echo now in my brain from the speakers. It gets kind of more like a crime kind of a film with more weird pictures, even more and more. And then, what do you think that this whole thing is? What is the party? Let's start from the party. Any idea? So, huh? Yeah? Yes, thank you. So, there's an artist, Simon Menner, who actually spent a lot of time in the Stasi archive here. I'm not going to talk about Stasi because that's not that interesting for this purpose. However, it's very interesting otherwise. Maybe in the current political context, even more interesting than we think. But I'm just going to talk about certain way of power through information and arrogance that it brings. This loop is going very quick. Okay, I have to speed up. Anyhow, so the party is just a birthday party of the chief of the department of this, as the Stasi office, sometime at the late, 80s. And they decided to do the party in the costumes of a part of the society that each of them is spying on. So obviously the guy who is the bishop here spies on the church, and so on, etc. It's not that interesting. It's kind of funny, but it's actually very sad. He also discovered this entire collection of double censorship. When the post is already censored, you can't send anything. Everything is being watched, open, etc., and so forth. But you yet employ an entire army of people that would photograph people posting things in the mailboxes, young, old, it doesn't matter. And then you get paranoid and you start, taking pictures of yourself, of your colleagues, when they're on spying missions in different ways, and so on, etc. And then it goes even more complicated, where you are photographing the West German spy that is spying on you, photographing them, kind of thing. And it becomes kind of, like this, because there was an allowance between the spy agencies that some spies from the West were allowed to roam in the East and vice versa, as long as you were watching them and they were watching you, and so on, etc. And I'm just bringing this as a kind of an idea of total information system that is being practically exercised in a very controlled environment where the state spends most of the GDP on basically secret services and so on. The one thing I wanted to kind of raise from that however, these people, I don't think they were thinking of doing anything bad. They were, working, supporting the ideology that make them in control of information, made it a principle of their work. If you wouldn't do that, then the entire system would collapse. And that comes with this arrogance, that comes with this self recognition of the mission of what you do and how you do, and so on, etc. And it's a good example because this apparatus has been one of the biggest in the world. Maybe China and maybe now North Korea have bigger in terms of how much money they spend, how many thousands of people are involved, and basically every 6th person is a spy in some other way. Some are being paid for, some not, and so on. But the interesting learning from that also, and it's not on the photographs, there's plenty of photographs that's showing you different ways of control, because the control wasn't exercised through, it was also, but not only, through repression and violence and force, but it was exercised through manipulating the environment around people and making them confused, disoriented. So the spies would come to the apartment of somebody they suspect of something, and they would change the T inside the T box, or they would move the objects that somebody is used to having them in some way into another way. So you never knew if this is happening in your head or is it happening in real. And that gives you this discomfort that you should know that they've been here, but you know not enough to know that they actually were, or if it is in your head, it is your problem, and so on. So that was the party, which is kind of interesting for me to think about this idea of information sickness and think about motion sickness. And we're going to kind of augment it and supercharge it now in a second. We're giving examples from current technology and so on, where your brain is thinking that you're moving, you're not moving, or your brain is thinking that you are not moving, but you're moving, or both happen at the same time. And it's, it causes certain problem for your way of thinking about the world. This is not new. This is an example from UK from 1930s, where the observation movement was funded. There was an idea of actually filmmakers and anthropologists and so on, etc., that they would like to understand British society not through quantification, but through kind of surveys and interviews, and they asked 500 volunteers to go into the public, like on these pictures, and interview them, because they thought that to understand how we can influence politics, we need to be able to interfere spaces that normally are not considered for data collection or quantify or qualify information, like workspaces, pubs, places of entertainment, and so on, etc. And the movement was running till the 80s, and then was rebuilt again, and there's a big archive of that movement, the methods and the way of thinking of, kind of imagining the world where information would help us understand what's going on in people's heads on the societal level. This is the kind of, the observation spinning wheel telling you where and how you should be, watching for things that you can learn something from them about the society. There's also Josh Bagley, who some years ago, 2016, using the Freedom of Information Act in the U.S. Through the Associated Press, asked the Department of New York Police to give him all these photographs. And those are photographs taken after 9/11, starting from black and white photography, where they had entire department going around New York and photographing places that belong to mostly Muslim people, mostly that have some Arabic written around them and so on, etc. And it's very benign, in a sense, like the collection of thousands of pictures are just mosques, shops, corner shops, and so on. And some basic information, who is the owner, what's the phone number, etc. There's nothing else there. But it gives this system of control, some sense of being in control by documenting some kind of a type of information. And I'm just gonna now leapfrog and just kind of dive deeply halfway through the loop now. This is the community mobility report from Google, and I just don't wanna even talk about now that we don't have to think about any spy agencies, we don't have to think about any movements anymore and so on, because the biggest collection of information, data, behavioral and so on, etc. is in hands of about 5 or 6 big tech companies, and it's not even about privacy anymore. It's become much more complex, I think, and there's not even a specific ideology, unless you think of cybernetics, unless you think about kind of more right-wing way of thinking about information ecosystem that is decentralized, that is driven by market, and so on, etc., and so on. The fact is that these companies have unprecedented ongoing processes and data repositories and all the data centers that are not only used for training AI models, large language models, and so on, but also are useful in this context where they kind of trying to prove that they're useful for society in a time of crisis, pandemic, where they revealed all these mobility reports during the COVID, helping to understand the state, how they can better control people movements, where movement is a very risky activity during that time. So this is just to kind of give you a sense of where I'm coming from when I think about information sickness. I ask, obviously, AI, what is information? And it's kind of interesting because you got this, it's structure, organized, process data, So AI gives you this answer that is written by a computer that analyze, other people writing about computer types of information. And it's not necessarily wrong, but then, information is also what we know as hallucinations. This is the type of hallucination that happened before hallucinations, where the first cartographers of United States for 200 years were convinced that California is an island. And that's, you can look at the maps in different places. That's not an unknown thing. And also, I think, just want to say that hallucination belongs to a human brain, but it doesn't belong to any artificial processing of data. They're not hallucinating at all. Then I asked Brave Leo for another kind of, interpretation of what information is. I'm curious, what do you think information is? And this one is kind of slightly better because it's also focusing on the fact that it has to be useful, relevant to particular purposes and so on, etc. And it's true, but also it's complicated where, it's true, but it's not true. This woman went to pick up her friend from Brussels, from the train station, and ended up in Croatia because GPS told her so. How she spent, 3 days driving, thinking that the friend's still going to be at the station waiting, I have no idea. She said she was disrupted. And the other guy ended up in the park, and that's how it happened. So this is the accurate information that we get from different kinds of systems. And my point, going to the end and kind of steering the conversation maybe in some direction, is that humans don't act on information that is truthful in any way or based on facts, etc. We mostly make our decisions and how we think about the world on information that is unreliable, that is not necessarily in any way has any veracity of any kind, and so on. And so I'm trying to now bring these things kind of together. What is the world based on big technology that is a black box, that is processing a lot of information and data, that is throwing at us in such a way that we don't have apparatus to deal with it. It is confusing, it is isolating, it is alienating, and that is about all of us. And that also creates a lot of polarization and other kind of realities that we have to deal with. On the other hand, you have a lot of companies that are exploiting that vulnerability of these new digital layers and systems, and there's an entire complex of political influencers that use personal data to help political actors to manipulate potential voters or people debating important issues related to climate change or other issues of that planetary scale. And you have also the third aspect to that. So you have the big tech, you have the influencers, and then you have the now supercharged AI that is pretending to be artificial and is pretending to be intelligent. So you have this hype of new technology that will solve all our problems, but it isn't. It is not doing anything, just pretending that it is a knowledge system. It is a pattern system, it's not a knowledge system. So for me, this kind of information sickness is where we are nowadays. And I'm probably gonna finish here, because there's more I can show you, but I think it's getting confusing when I talk more. But you get my point. Do you get my point about the information sickness?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, well, that's the major point I wanted to make. Everything else doesn't matter. So Sarah, the microphone is yours.
Maybe I'll jump in between. Does anyone have a question? If not, then I will say that I agree with with the state of the world right now. You feel sick, but you also feel like if you don't process the information, you are also doing not the right thing. Did you find a way to deal with information sickness?
Yeah, it's some ginger. Well, I'm different ways of dealing. So my work is focusing on exactly that. But to be able to deal with any sickness, it is important to figure out what are the symptoms of the sickness and what are the causes of the sickness. And I can see that a lot of us, a lot of policymakers, a lot of companies, etc., are persistently focusing on the symptoms, not on the causes. And the causes are the business models behind the technology in the first place. So you have to challenge those business models. There's also certain assumptions about stupidity, naivety, or lack of literacy of people who are using new technologies. I don't think that's a problem, that the symptom is. That's what it is. And I think we have to be much more open that people that often are being called populists and so on, etc., are maybe the people behind the future revolution, because revolutions are always populist. And we have to find a way of talking through these bridges, walls, and barriers, rather than qualifying people into pockets. That already has been done by the tech itself. And I think we also have to find some fun in thinking about or rethinking what we've been kind of trained to think about technology. Like a lot of technology language that we're using is being imposed on us through big tech companies and certain ideologies that then proliferated to universities and schools, etc. And we kind of cannot imagine any other way of talking about technology. And I think changing that, ability of our imagination to look at it differently and call things as they are, and rather focus on what technology is doing right now to us right here, rather than speculating what this technology can do in the future, is actually one of the ways of dealing with it as well. So those would be like 3 different ways of thinking about it.
Yeah, really interesting. Maybe we can discuss this further after the talks.
I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, Sarah Grant. Sarah Grant is a lecturer at the Angewandte in Wien at the moment, and the founder of the interactive media studio Cosmic in Berlin. Her work explores the electromagnetic spectrum and computer networks as artistic and political landscapes. Since 2015, she has organized the Radical Network Conference, fostering critical and creative experiments in telecommunications. She will talk about community networks, peer-to-peer protocols, mesh networks, self-hosting, and in other words, some of the alternatives to the commercial internet that are available. Let's welcome Sarah.
Thank you. I see my slides, yeah. Don't worry, it won't be as technical as it sounds. I'll keep it surface or conceptual level. Yes, radical networking normalized. That's what I decided to call this talk. So, as was mentioned, I used to run this event called Radical Networks, which, oh wait, let me see. Okay, great. Which, yeah, it was a conference, arts festival. We had speakers, we had an exhibition for artists who were working with radio and computer networks in creative, critical ways. We had workshops, and the whole point of me making this event was because I just wanted to sort of open the door for people from the general public, you know, who were curious about this stuff to come in and sort of learn more about it, because it's very, admittedly, it's a little bit intimidating maybe on the outside, because it feels very technical and very hard to access. Yet, you know, there's been a lot of energy, especially since Trump was elected in 2016, but even before that, you know, there was lots of interest, it seemed, in like mesh networks, community mesh networks, how to like set up your own web server, but not a lot of, you know, ideas about how to get started doing that. But, you know, the thing with, before I get into the slides, the reason why I called the talk this is because, you know, I'm sort of like, well, frankly, I'm sort of like sick of having to like frame this stuff as like radical. Like, it should just be normalized, you know, like wanting to run our own networks and our own servers. Like, that shouldn't be like, oh, it's radical, you know, like we're like, you know, doing something that maybe, you know, shouldn't be done. So this is kind of like how I'm starting to talk about this stuff now, is like, yes, I suppose it is radical, but let's just make it normal too, you know, like, yeah, so like kind of, you know, following what Marek talked about, I suppose maybe I mean, like, we didn't plan this or anything, but but it just so happens that what I want to talk about is sort of more like maybe practical ways to get around having to deal with these systems of surveillance, harvesting, you know, whatever, just these like commercial platforms that we're kind of subscribed into, whether or not we like it, you know, and it's like, it's really hard to have, you know, to have work relationships, social relationships, you know, it's hard to do anything without being involved in these, you know, these platforms. I mean, Facebook's kind of faded out a bit, but, you know, Google is like, I mean, it feels like it's here to stay. And of course, with AI, you know, like, you know, since this AI, like, revolutions kind of happened in, you know, in the last year or so. I mean, it feels to me that way because every time I open up an application now, there's like, now it's like a mushrooms popped up in my application, where now there's like, it's like AI powered, and that's fine. I mean, I've been using it actually in my work lately, and it's been incredible for some things. But again, it's this like closed system, you know, that is going to ultimately just funnel, like further narrow how we make sense of our world and how we, well, you know, the more we use it to sort of do our thinking for us. I'm going off a bit on tangent, I'll get to my slides. But anyway, just to say that, like, you know, it feels like the more we are beholden to these platforms and these systems and these networks, you know, while it makes some things, you know, easier and more streamlined, it also narrows our experience of reality and our own creative contributions to it, I feel like. So anyways, the slide says here, what is our relationship to technology, the computers, the internet? I mean, that's kind of what I just was talking about. And then, you know, what could our relationship be? Actually, the slide used to say, what should it be? But sometimes, just because this is my practice, I get a bit like zealous, and I've found that sometimes people have been like, why are you telling us what we should be doing? Okay, I don't mean to tell you, I don't mean to shame anyone. It's not, okay, you should be doing this, and if you're not, then you're doing something wrong. So maybe what could is a friendlier word. So yeah, what could it be? Just what are the possibilities? And again, like, just to give like an overview, I just want to introduce some of these ideas to you, just so that you're aware of them in case you're not already aware of them, that these things exist, here in Berlin even. And I just want to talk about mesh networks, peer-to-peer protocols, and self-hosting. And these three things often overlap with each other. So I'm going to show you some projects, many of which, like I said, are actually here in Berlin, being developed here in Berlin. Just to make you aware that there are alternatives out there. So with mesh networks, one project that I've been working or I've been exploring quite a bit lately, they're not based in Berlin as far as I know, but Meshtastic is a software basically that you can load onto a little device called an ESP32, which sounds really nerdy, but you can get them for like 20 or 30 bucks, and then you can go to the Meshtastic website, and I have to give them credit for being a very technical project. They actually have a really nice onboarding process. If you can get one of these devices and connect it over USB to your laptop and go to the website, they make it real easy to flash or upload the software to your device from the web browser, which is nice. And these devices are very small, and they're kind of cool looking too, if you're into this kind of thing. They're like, I don't know, tiny. And there's all kinds of cases you can put them in. And what is also nice about them is that they come on board the device, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and LoRa, and antennas. And the LoRa antenna, I assume we know Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, but LoRa you might not have heard of before. It's a long-range radio protocol that's designed to operate over long ranges. If you have a clear view like this, you can even get over 100 miles, kilometers. Anyway, whatever. So quite long range. And the way that Meshtastic works basically is, I'm sorry, I actually meant to bring a device with me, but totally slipped my mind. But actually, where's my phone? The way it works is you get this device. There's a phone app, there's a companion app to it too. But you get this small device, you upload the firmware to it, and then it's a Meshtastic device that boots up. It automatically joins this network, and there's loads of these devices all across Berlin itself. But to interact with the device, so the green rectangles in the laptop indicates your phone or a laptop. There's a mobile app you can install, and it just creates, it gives you this interface. I'm sure you can't see, I should have put a slide in there. But anyway, there's a chat app, there's a map that shows you, where all the different devices are, and you can see there's a bunch of pins here in Berlin. And so the way that the phone connects with the Meshtastic device is over Bluetooth. So the radio has Bluetooth on it, and you turn on your Bluetooth and you can chat with or connect with your device through Bluetooth. But then your device is connecting with other devices in the city across LoRa, because this is the long-range protocol. You can also connect to your device over Wi-Fi. Anyway, it's hard. I don't mean to get too technical again, but just to say that this is the so-called topology of this Meshtastic network, and what people often. So I myself, like I said, I've just fairly recently started working with Meshtastic. I'm trying to figure out how it fits into my practice, but the way that most people use it is indeed to be able to chat with each other without having to use the internet. This is not on the internet. This is, even if it's Wi-Fi, you're not connecting to a router that's connected to to a modem going out to an internet service provider. You're connecting over a Wi-Fi connection between your phone or your laptop and the device, or you can use Bluetooth, and then the devices are chatting with each other over these LoRa frequencies, which I think is around like 918 megahertz in Europe. But the point is, this is a way to communicate without the internet, and people often use this. I have been learning at music festivals. There's also like a lot of preppers that are into this, you know. But it's that kind of thing. It's a way to communicate without the internet being involved. Another another mesh network, which probably I presume some of you know here, is Freifunk, which is here in Berlin. It's the Berlin-based mesh network, although it's throughout Germany. Yeah, I mean, the way that this works is you get a router, you flash the firmware onto it, and depending on like how you're participating in the network, you can take on different roles. You know, you can either just, you know, you can just be a client where you're just, oh, is that my slide? Oh, okay, sorry. I was like, I didn't have a video in my slides. Okay, anyway, you can join the mesh network, and the thing that's cool about mesh networks is if anyone else in the mesh network is, for example, connected to the internet, that internet connection can be shared throughout the network. So even if, like, you know, geographically you're far away from an internet connection, you know, if you're connected to that person through the mesh network, so let's say, just to make it a bit clearer maybe, like let's say there's like 10 people and they're all on the mesh network, and let's say that there's like, you know, one or two street blocks between each of these people, and the person at the very end is connected to the internet. You might see the neighbor that's 2 or 4 blocks from you on the mesh network, but they then see the other people, and through them you're able to also see these other neighbors on this mesh network. So this is called hops, you know, like how many people are between you and the destination you're trying to get to. So anyway, suffice to say, if anyone in that network is connected to the internet or is running a file server or a chat server or some kind of network service, you can access it. So mesh networks are often also sometimes used to connect in like last mile situations where internet infrastructure doesn't make it out to somewhere rural. But anyway, we're talking about how to go around the internet. So you don't even need the internet, right? The point is just that it's also a way to share services like that or to share access. But you can also just communicate with everyone within the network without even having to care about the internet. Oh yeah, just another diagram showing how it works. Anyway, I think I pretty much explained this. This is if you want to share your connection to the internet. All right, so that's just a couple projects to know about. Now, the next one, peer-to-peer protocols. So there are many peer-to-peer protocols in existence. So many, but I chose to mention P2Panda because this one's being developed right here in Berlin in Schillerkiez in Neukölln, actually at a place called Offline Space, which is just around the corner from Weise Sieben, which is the studio that I'm a part of in Neukölln. And those are the lovely humans who develop it. Ads on the furthest left. Andreas is a friend of mine, and oh dear, I'm blanking on the other two names. But in any case, these are the people that develop it, and P2Panda is a very, I think it's a great project because on one hand, they are creating tools and libraries that other developers can use to build peer-to-peer protocols that prioritize privacy and anonymity and sort of this modular design, you know, principles. So you can create your own protocol using the building blocks from P2Panda, but there's also applications that, you know, you can use if you're not a developer out of the box, like Toolkitty. Actually, they just had a release party at Offline and at Weises Eben, where they're like working on building out these two tools. Aardvark is a local first collaborative text editor. Toolkitty is a coordination toolkit for collectives, organizations, to place to share resources and organize events in a shared calendar. So they're making all these different social tools and community tools, you know, in the effort to provide alternatives to the internet or other, like, you know, popular platforms, which are, you know, I mean, yeah, which are harvesting your data and surveying, and I don't know, just using you as the product. Anyway. Okay, self-hosting. So here's so self-hosting is basically how it sounds. If you have a website, often, you know, we'll go get like web hosting space somewhere, like in Hetzner, whatever. Cloudflare, my God. Anyway, and so what happens is, you know, you pay somebody to have either a whole server or more commonly like a folder on a server to put your web files, and that's where your data lives, is over there, and then, you know, and then if something happens, like the server goes down, then, you know, then your website goes down with it. Also, it's just, you know, I mean, most people probably aren't super concerned about having their website somewhere on some remote hardware, but, you know, I tend to meet many activists and people who do have concerns on having their data in the hands of someone else who, you know, can take it offline or otherwise compromise it. So if, you know, if you are concerned, it's like, okay, what do you do? One thing you can do is self-host your website or your file server or whatever it might be, from your home. And then, you know, there are ways to expose an IP address, or basically a way for people from outside your home network to connect to your device, to browse the contents. But, so generally that's what self-hosting is. A couple of projects I wanted to show is one that I am actually working on, called Futura Tropica, with my collaborator, Juan Pablo Casillas Sosa. He's based here in Berlin for about 10 or 12 years now, but he's originally from Bogota, Colombia, and yeah, we met while doing a fellowship at an art and technology place in New York called iBeam. And he's an artist and a designer, but also, you know, not a programmer, you know, not practicing technology, but very, very well understands, you know, technical concepts. And he had this idea for a peer-to-peer network that existed within the tropics, only within the tropics, and was basically an alternative network or internet of sorts, peer-to-peer network, for people within the tropics to share food, culture, music, art, clothing, because, you know, his feeling is that, you know, having grown up within the tropics, especially internet web technology has been imported, you know, from the north down to the south. And as somebody of the tropics, you know, from the tropics, he's well aware that there's this attitude that the tropics are like developing nations, you know, they don't have a lot of their own technology, like, it's just sort of like disenfranchised, you know, and this, you know, northern, web culture is sort of like brought down there. And his attitude is, you know, I would like to create a network that is very tropical in nature and culture, and sort of prioritizes and centers, you know, the fact that there is, you know, perfectly valid technology and culture and all this happening down here. So I joined the project with him to help him build out this infrastructure, and it's running over a peer-to-peer protocol called IPFS, Interplanetary File System. It's another very popular peer-to-peer protocol. Yeah, and what it basically consists of is, currently Raspberry Pis are what we use. A Raspberry Pi has its own web server, and it's an IPFS node. It is connected to the internet just because it has to be, unfortunately, because that's how we can like reach, like the nodes can see each other globally. Although one improvement I'm exploring and I hope to make to it is to, in fact, eventually get it off the internet and have the long distance comms happen over the HF radio spectrum. I'm a licensed ham radio operator. I'm always embarrassed when I say that out loud because it sounds so nerdy, but I am. And so I've been currently actually exploring how to have this network exist locally. If there are nodes like within range of each other, can see each other over a mesh network, but then can have like a global connection happening, like between Kinshasa and Bogota, for example. You know, these comms can happen over an HF frequency, because even though it's called high frequency, it's actually like relative to like Wi-Fi, which is 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and HF is more like around like 5 to 30, oh my gosh, megahertz or kilohertz, I'm embarrassing myself. But anyway, it's much lower, like the frequency, than Wi-Fi. And the lower the frequency of a radio wave, the further it can travel with less power. And HF is known that you can bounce signals, like you can chat with people like 2 continents over. So anyway, that's the plan for that. And there's one other aspect to it, this USB-based distribution system. It's like another protocol layer, you could think of it. I don't know if any of you have heard of sneaker nets, but sneaker nets are kind of what they sound like. They're like foot-powered, human-powered, or pigeon-powered, or cat-powered. I mean, there's been many experiments, but basically live bodies carrying data on like a drive of some sort from one to the other. So there's also this layer where, you know, there's a USB stick and there's a certain file structure. You put data on it that you want to share. You know, you mail it to someone or you hand it to someone, and they put it in their Futura Tropica node, and it just automatically pulls in the data and knows where to put it. So anyway, you know, these are the kinds of things that I'm working on personally. The last project I wanted to show you is Superglue, which is being developed, was developed quite a while ago by my partner, Danya Vasiliev, but he's reviving it, which is very exciting. And Superglue it consists of 2 main pieces. One is an authoring tool, which is basically a browser extension that lets you create websites in your browser without having to code. And the other piece of it is the personal server, which is just like a little web server that allows you to self-host a web page that you make with the authoring tool. And then anyone can join from the outside if you open up the right port on your router. Anyway, sorry, this is like a lot of stuff I'm trying to cram into the time we have, but I just wanted to just as much as possible give a overview that, okay, there's all these different things we can do to create our own infrastructures and to, you know, we don't have to use these platforms and the internet. Yes, it does require more effort and like some know-how, but you know, but like me, Danya, Juan, like, you know, like there are many people out there who are trying to work on making it more accessible, and of course it's hard. But the one thing I really wanted to discuss, if possible, because is that despite all these efforts, obviously it hasn't been critically, there's not been a mass adoption yet, and I get it. I mean, at the end of the day, it is still very technical. It still does take effort, and that's something that, you know, I think needs to be discussed more, even from people like me and others where we're building these tools. I think every now and then it's good to come out of our holes and be like, okay, how can we really make this, like, what will it take, like, what is really needed for people to feel that they want to use these things, or just have the headspace or the time, you know, because that's kind of, that's sort of like the holy grail, so to speak, is how to get people to actually use it outside of the hacker circles or the activist, you know, circles. So anyway, with that, I will stop. I hope I didn't go too long. I wasn't timing myself.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. Do we have any questions?
First of all, thank you both for your presentations. And actually, you started mentioning it at the end of your presentation, and that's also a question that I had during the first one is, yeah, how do we get people actually to think about these questions? And I have the feeling that, like, in the first place, convenience may be the main criteria for a lot of people when we think about technology. And I really wonder, how can we bring those questions to a larger public, even though it has a lot of directions, and it's also for me difficult to pinpoint exactly what is important in this whole topic. Like, are we supposed to talk about digital literacy or privacy or something else? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, the question is multifolded and it's kind of interesting overall. I really don't like to separate things. When you talk about people, we usually don't think we are the people. Kind of an assumption that we kind of are better educated, more critical thinkers, and savvy on using technology. I mean, if you look at the room here and look what we have in our pockets and what kind of, technology we're using, we are in the same place. And I think you have to think about us as people that we come with the same assumption. On which side you are, you will be thinking that the other side using it wrongly. And I would just challenge you and kind of think about, what I'm art historian by education. And for me, it's interesting to see that a lot of tactics that you can see being used by political actors that I don't necessarily like at all are the same tactics that come from avant-garde and Dada movements and so on, etc. And it's total screwing, everything up. Because it removes a lot of activist tools that used to be the powerful tools that activists have had since the digitization of information became with the internet around 1993 and so on. So my first step would be to kind of, just relax a bit and step back and don't make assumptions about them and us and them and so on, etc. Because I think it's much more complicated than we think. And the other narrative I would propose is that like, as much as I am promoting, and I'm a big fan also of the work that Sarah is doing, etc., this is not a solution to solve the world. This is like anything that you scale will face the same problems that what is being scaled now already revealed. Right? So the question for me is, do we need that scale in the first place? And I'm not a proponent of sovereignty and, splinternet. I'm not talking about that. But there's a certain problem with scale that is creating new problems that we have no historical apparatus for addressing, and they're causing a lot of disruption right now. And disruption is one of the things that plays very well into the current business models, because chaos and disruption is fantastic for the business model that is based on attention and so on. So I don't have a solution for the question that you have, but I would like to rather try to have a discussion on a different level than just talking about we need more privacy, more encryption, more decentralized, more open source, and so on, etc. We know that is not working. However, that doesn't mean that these things are bad or not good enough. They are, but unfortunately, everything's been appropriated in that terms. Infrastructure belongs to a very small number of actors. Open source is controlled by Microsoft these days, if you like it or not. And it's training all the AI that they own as well, and so on. So this is my answer to your question. This is not very satisfying. I'm sorry about that. Sarah, you want to add anything?
Yeah, actually, could you state the question one more time? Yeah.
So I would say, now if I have to ask it again, I would ask it differently.
Okay.
But I guess the question would be how to get people to think about those questions in general, and how do we maybe develop like a culture of wanting to be curious about technology and questioning it.
Let's see, right. Yeah, I mean, like from my perspective, like I said, you know, like I feel like I have been working for that question, you know, how to figure that out, you know, just by doing radical networks and by, you know, I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, I mean, and I've learned a lot myself in that experience. I kind of went into it thinking, oh yeah, like, you know, I'm going to tell people about this, you know, and I think what I've learned from all this is that it's kind of like what Marek was saying, like, you know, I mean, I'm totally guilty of falling into the them and us thing, you know, where it's like, oh yeah, you know, like me and everyone and my friends and colleagues, like we know about this stuff. We need to let other people know about it, you know. And indeed, that approach hasn't worked very well. And I've even, you know, once or twice had a couple of people say to me, like, well, how I changed should to could, you know, like, hey, you know, like, you know. I mean, one woman in Singapore, when I gave a talk, she's like, you know, it feels like you're talking down to us. And I was like, wow, that's really not my intention. I don't know. It's really tricky, indeed. And I think that's exactly what I'm trying to figure out myself too. Again, it's not very satisfying because I don't know. It's very difficult, especially if you're someone in the weeds, you know, working on this stuff. Of course you want people to know about it and to care, you know, but I feel like it would take somebody not in the weeds maybe to figure that out. I don't know. Sorry, do you want it back? Oh, okay.
Any more questions?
Yeah, to your last remark, I thought that it's most of the time like I feel a problem of like the ecosystem, that you have like your phone and you have probably a protocol like HTTP or whatever, and then you have one app and then you can chat over that app, but most of your friends are using Telegram or Signal. It's like the same situation with like the other apps that you have. You all also want kind of this all-in-one thing. You don't want to mess around with all the different solutions, because I think the cool part is it's like crafty. You can craft something yourself. You're like able to do a lot of customization. But as you also said, it needs a lot of like knowledge before you need to get into that. And I think that this is like a big part, that the people have this problem with the ecosystem, that maybe this like makeshift situations, or you where you try to overcome this, is just placed in the same way. You try to take away a friction that is not feelable at the same situation. Like WhatsApp taking your information is not feelable, that it takes your information. Like using a messenger that is not taking information, you don't feel that friction. And maybe this is like a big part that the other apps have to show the friction by law, I don't know, policy, or your app has to deal somehow else with this, or your application or your infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it makes you think about the fact that indeed that, you know, the more things like efforts that are put out there, also the more noise it creates. There's so much noise. And like, I mean, all the projects I've shown could be called noise. Yeah, indeed. I mean, yeah, I mean, right. And you know, and the thing about friction, since you mentioned that, I mean, this is the thing that I actually miss, that I mean, that I'm so unsatisfied by our digital world, is like the lack of friction, actually. I mean, again, I don't know if other people feel this way, but for me, it's like, it is so satisfying to like, you know, make like, just to cook my own food, or to like, just, you know, feel the handle of a door and not always have you know, like when everything is frictionless and like touchless and like, you know, magical, you kind of like, you're basically a head in a jar at that point, you know, which I'm, you know, it's just like a thought that I have. And so when I hear like, you know, friction and stuff, I'm like, okay, on one hand, also, I know that if something is too annoying to use, you won't use it. That kind of friction's not good. But yeah, I mean, this is why I am a fan. Actually, Marek, I don't know if this is what you mean by like splinternet. Like, do you mean like these hyper localized kind of projects, or what do you mean by splinternet? Actually, wait. Can you actually?
I had in mind the state splinternet, so all the internet closed within the borders of the country that is under control of the country.
Okay, right. Yeah, because like these like the Peter Panda protocol, like a lot of those protocols, or like Futura Tropica even. Like Futura Tropica is has a very specific context. It's not trying to be a global network. And I'm actually been kind of a fan of indeed like crafting these more, homegrown local flavors of networks. I mean, yeah, the downside is somebody has to kind of know a bit what they're doing, but I mean, nothing's going to be perfect, I think that, making, like, trying to find, like, make like a killer app that everyone's going to use, and yeah, that's going to scale infinitely. I gave up on that like a long time ago. Like, I think it's much more interesting just to do what you can for your, your needs and your community's needs. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling now, so.
I would like to ask Marek, because you touched up on this before, what kind of technologies can help us to flee the information sickness? You talked about open source and questioning the system, and coming to that, I feel like we are very much stuck in the system, also because of capitalism. Everybody is seeking for attention, and I was wondering, do you see like a good outcome? Do you see also like an alternative in technologies that Sarah showed? I have to think about Mastodon, now that Twitter has been bought by Elon Musk and has so much control over the algorithm. Yeah. So my question is, do you see a way out of this? And if so, how?
Well, taking your questions into the extreme would be like, okay, let's get all of us on Mastodon and we're going to be living in a better world. I'm like, maybe not. So my point is that, let's just go back to this friction thing for a second, because that's a good entry point for the answering the question, is that think about friction in connection with accessibility, because you cannot disconnect these two things. And there's often confusion about what kind of friction you need. Do I want people to learn PGP and explain for the 100 millionth time what is the difference between two types of keys and all this kind of stuff? No, I'd rather have frictionless stuff and nobody knows what it is and just using it. Fair enough. But there are other elements of technology that should not have friction, and because many people don't have the abilities or skills or needs for experiencing the friction, and actually technology is helping them a lot to do things that we consider being basic for us and for granted, and so on. So there's a kind of a fine balance between these two things. But don't buy the narrative that if you look at advertisement from Amazon or from Apple and so on, you would see often people with disabilities that they are part of the story where the technology is doing this magic for them that they can participate now in life that they were not able to do before. And unfortunately, it's true. It does this for them, and you can't deny that. On the other hand, that is also justifying the simplification when it's being used on the majority of the population that doesn't need lack of this friction to fall into the same kind of space. When it comes to promoting technology, there are better technologies and worse technologies, but technology is always related to the context. So all the technologies we're using are made by people, programmed by people, with intentions of people, and this is usually the problem that technology designed for one thing become a solution for many different kinds of things, or creates new problems and so on, etc. So we can talk about that open source is better than closed source because it is, politically speaking. Is it the solution for addressing the planetary problems that we have right now, political problems? It may not be necessarily. to protect privacy, it's better to use these tools or not tools. It's better not to use WhatsApp. It's better to use something else. Of course, it's better. But is it really addressing the problems we're trying to solve with these technologies? I don't want to disconnect technology from what it does, and it is communicating, it is sharing information, it is opening access to resources far away, and so on, etc. And it all depends what kind of resources they are, what is the communication used for, who is behind it, and so on, etc. And it doesn't matter what the tool is. You can make the argument that we often do that Tor or other technologies as such are supporting activists, dissidents, and so on, and they do, but they also support pedophiles and so on, etc. Because it's not about technology, it's about who and with what intentions is doing something in the real world outside of the digital, and so on. So there's no simple answer. The usual question I get is, in a way, what you just were asking about, is there a magic USB stick with the set of software that would solve the problems we care about? And the answer to that question, there isn't. And so it's better to have a discussion about, in what circumstances, what kind of technology should be used by whom and in what context, rather than taking these things for granted and dividing the world into bad and good technology. There's no such a thing. It's all about, but also that doesn't mean that there are neutral technologies. There aren't. There's no neutrality in technology, if you like. So it's a complex problem. So I don't think we should have a discussion about alternatives, because then we walk away from the room thinking, I'm better now. I'm going to, no, we won't be better, because it's about politics, it is about who have the power, all of this kind of old stuff, that technology is just a medium here of different kinds. And we can be satisfied by being part of the cool group of people using cool technologies, doing cool things. But would that ever scale to solve the problems of people who have less access to these things? I doubt it. So sorry, this is really sad, no? Can you ask a funny question? Because I don't have funny answers. So maybe question is funny. Sorry, everyone.
Would you like to?
Well, no, I was going to say, poor you for inviting me and Marek here, because I have a very similar outlook. No, but I mean, really though, I mean, I think it's time to confront this, because indeed, like, and I'm working on these things, and and I will continue to work on these things, but it does become more and more clear to me that, really clear that, I mean, I don't know if this is even cynical, but like, I mean, everybody has their lives, it's busy, our lives are busy, they're complicated. The world seems to, as ever, get more chaotic and complicated and, tense and whatever. There's a lot of things going on politically, economy, like there's so much stuff going on that it's we do what we can with what we have, and that's the thing that I've been coming to terms with, is even though I am involved trying to make technology, and other people who are trying to make new technologies and protocols and apps and stuff, it might be, I think it's good that those efforts are happening. It might be that maybe now is not the time when people are going to be ready to use them. Actually, even, like, I remember in like 2010, 11, 12 were like when sort of what I became aware of were when some of the first like efforts, at least in the media art world, and such, to make like mesh, to create these mesh networking projects and peer-to-peer stuff, offline first, like it was kind of like an in thing to be working on then, and then it kind of like faded out. And now it feels like it's coming back, like really coming back, which is like one of the reasons why Danya is like, bringing back superglue. And I've just noticed, I've been going to like different events, speaking at different things. I've just noticed that there's an interest in it again. And so some older projects are like coming back, or they never went away. I guess what I'm saying is like, I think it's important to keep making tools and these things, but in terms of what will get people to adopt it, I don't know. That's a bigger emergent phenomenon that will happen whenever it does. And the thing I was going to say, maybe it's cynical, but there is a part of me who thinks maybe it really sometimes, when a system, not to just refer to us all as a system, but in a way we are part of, a system as a society and a population, it settles into its ways of doing things the best it can, and it takes a major disruption to have actual new behaviors and new ways of doing things. So maybe it will take that, some kind of really, unfortunately, catastrophic event or disruption to happen, before, and maybe then all these tools that are being built will suddenly feel natural to like incorporate into one's lives. I mean, it might be that, but I don't think there's any like way, like it's going to take either like tragedy or work. I mean, but there's no like easy way. There just isn't, I don't know. Sorry, guys. Well, I have a dark sense of humor.
Thanks. I'd like to answer this. It's not a question, but more like a comment, also drawing from what you were saying, because in a way, like technology is neither good, neither bad, but there was this one guy who also said they're neither neutral, because in a way you can use a hammer, of course, to like hit in a nail, but then and the hammer is neutral. You could also do this with a rifle or a pistol, and then but I mean the design of the technology is also inscribing certain types of ways of using it, and I think of then when it comes to algorithms and stuff like this, like the way how they're designed has a inscribed like political agenda. And then I wonder if these sort of off-grid, offline initiatives, activist projects, are also somehow originating from like the lack of belief that this bigger superstructure can be actually changed. And then I still wonder, maybe they can by policymaking, by kind of reforming them and stuff like this, by this sort of bigger collective agreements that are made up through like the long run, so to say, the going through the systems and also the political systems and stuff like this. So I wonder if it does need catastrophe or also just like an increased awareness about those things, and then also maybe then bigger political actions that can result in a change, an incremental change, rather than everyone going off grid.
Okay, so this is a very good point. Thank you. So I just want to challenge you on the neutrality, because just for the clarity is that what I have seen for the last 40 years, as long as I've been working with tech and stuff, is that especially for people who develop technology, engineers, coders, and so on, etc., technology has its own kind of personality, if you like. Let's use the very basic word. Like when you talk about AI right now, we talk about something that it is taken for granted that there is AI. There is no AI. Nobody invented AI, just to be clear, right? It's some algorithm and large language models and so on, etc. There's no kind of a sovereign technological entity that anybody can call AI that has any ability to do anything on its own. There isn't. Nobody invented that yet, and probably won't for a very long time. With basic tools like Hammer, Hammer is not neutral, because it becomes technology when it's used, not when it's not used. There's no technology when it's not used. If there's no user, there's no Hammer. And only we define that technology because we have the concept of it. Just to clarify that, because I don't want to talk about technology in an abstract. I often work with data scientists, etc., and there are all these concepts of data is neutral. It isn't. It's an attribution to things that we attribute to on certain ideas we have about the world. But your point is very true that nothing lasts forever, and you may have a massive crisis that would cause a collapse of given system or way of thinking. But also I really deeply believe that a constellation of things, which is kind of educating policymakers and taking them out of the silo that they are being basically cordoned by the lobbyists and technologies, etc., that are telling them what technology is and all of this nonsense. and that they can have better policy making that is also actionable, because we have a lot of good policies, but are ineffective because it's very hard to implement them. Also, I agree with you when you were saying, though I challenge you, it wasn't personal, don't take it personally. It's more about, I believe in education, but not education in the sense that we should, teach kids coding and they're gonna solve our problems in the future. Maybe, I doubt it, but education on more critical thinking about how we see the role of technology in how we understand the world and how we want to change the world for what we think is better for, the generation that actually have future. I don't have any future anymore. I'm too old for that, and so on. And I think that's super important. And also, appreciating other groups. We work a lot now with people over 65 that are assumed to, be incapable. Whatever, you can use negative descriptions of how difficult they find using technology, but they depend on technology and they still have a power of, voting and impact on where the society is going. And there's a massive knowledge that they have accumulated over their lives and so on. And recognizing where they have these dependencies and helping them navigate these spaces and recognize things that is extremely hard to recognize if you were trained on a different model of the world without digital, and now you have the digital, and you cannot really distinguish between conspiracy theory and the world research video or whatever, because they look the same, and so on. So I would definitely say that you have to work with policymakers and build better policies, because this is the only practical, legal, fiscal control you have over overgrown businesses and billionaires that have incredibly weird views of the world. You also have to invest in younger and older generation across different sectors in different ways. And that all needs to be done. And I think also promoting these technologies that we were talking with Sarah Mostin with me, because I didn't show anything, but based on distributed open source, decentralized, peer-to-peer, etc. and so forth, are not only for the sake of these technologies themselves. Don't look at them as gadgets. Look at them also as a ways of thinking about how you can imagine communication through the same looking devices, because they all look the same. They're kind of ugly, however you like some of them. But this is a bunch of plastic and other stuff, wires and so on. There's nothing beautiful about them, and so on. Sorry, I'm just rambling now, because I think it's a lot. I just don't want to sound pessimistic or cynical, because my work is not that. But I also want to get us all here and myself from this way of having the same conversation over and over again about alternatives, all these kind of things. I'm kind of tired of that. And it's December.
Yeah, please. I was going to say everything he says, yes, I'm also tired of it.
Is there a last question before we move to the bar?
So we now talked a lot on what technologies there exist, and that we don't have enough uses for them, and that it maybe takes a big tragedy to come to raise awareness enough. But isn't maybe the work connected to this exactly raising consciousness for the actual state we have at the moment, and fighting against the numbness that the most of users of modern technology face? Maybe there, at the first place, there's a conscious decision, a trade-off. You want to use Signal, but instead you use WhatsApp or something because your friends don't have Signal. Mm-hmm. Then you get it out of your head. For the most of people, it's like that. It's just out, it's numbness. For some of them, the developers of all these weird technologies, it is striking enough to come up with alternatives. And we just pointed out maybe we need other education systems, not coding in schools, but raising awareness on how to use technology. I just wonder, how do you raise such a consciousness in a society that is trained now for 25 years on using this technology? Or isn't this possible and we have to go the way over policymakers and try to work against capitalism to make it happen?
Yeah, I mean, maybe my perspective, I mean, I'm sure my perspective is biased, but I feel like there's been so much awareness that has been raised. I mean, of course, that's not going to apply to all segments of society, that hasn't touched or reached everyone, perhaps, but I feel like, but I have a bit of like awareness fatigue even in that I mean, so even if like, let's say every single person everywhere, regardless of, you know, age or background or education or whatever, was aware of the problems, like that's often where like it stops. Because okay, you know, but then you're like, oh, okay, but indeed, like what can be done? I mean, I think that, you know, it's sort of like, you know, how it reminds me of like recycling, you know, about how it's like make sure you do your part recycling, or make sure you do your part not using too much energy or too much water, you know, when in reality it turns out that like the biggest perpetrators, you know, of like wasting water or energy or, you know, like basically screwing up the environment are not individuals, but actually these 5 corporations. I'm just throwing that number out there. But so which makes me think that maybe it does come back to like policy and regulation. Like that's, I mean, at the end of the day, of course, every individual contributes, and it's good that we all are able to do our part and participate the best that we can, you know, whatever the best looks like. But yeah, but at the same, well, actually I'm not, I must say I am a little bit cynical though of like the implementation of like policy and regulations, because I feel that at these levels of government and administration, there's so much money involved, you know, and I feel like there's a lot of people who, it's like this elite circle of people who, you know, might change things a little bit here or there, but they're not gonna like topple things. But that's where I have to stop, because otherwise I'll just start like rambling again. I'll let Marek pick it up.
Thank you so much.
You want to finish? That's okay with me.
I mean, we can keep on talking afterwards also.
Great. No, let's. I agree with you.
Yeah? Okay, so we've reached the end of today's session.
Yes, I would like to invite you to continue this interesting conversation at the bar, but before, I want to thank everyone who made this possible. I want to thank the speakers, the listeners here and also online. This was the last loop of this year, but we will be back in the beginning of next year, so see you guys then.